Hi, everyone. This is Christine Flynn. Thanks for joining me on this mini episode of Catechism Fridays. I'm kind of laughing because if you're listening to this podcast version, I've actually decided to start doing video, and I'm putting this on YouTube. So if you search for the Catholic Mama, maybe I'll put a link in the show notes. I don't know. I'm still trying to get used to this whole idea of video. I mean, put me in front of a microphone. I'm cool, but there's a whole different animal to, to video. And I'm laughing because half of my children are in bed. The other half are playing video games. They're playing Mario Kart. I got full mom bun and a sweatshirt on. So yeah, I'm really doing this video thing really well, aren't I? It's very funny. I just, to be honest, I'm so impressed by vloggers and photographers who are able to, especially mothers, are able to get themselves looking like really, really good and styled and all this stuff. To be honest, I don't have the energy. I just it's never been my forte. It's not like I know how to do this stuff. I was a tomboy growing up, and so it's just not even my wheelhouse, to use some kind of corporate jargon. Okay, so let's just get into it. Get into what I'm good at, which is reading from the Catholic Catechism. Uh, I'm going to start. We actually moved on. We were talking about the problems with sin and how pervasive they are, and the differences between mortal and venial sins. We've covered all that the past couple of weeks. We are going to move into. We're still in part 3, the life of Christ, section 1, man's vocation, life in the spirit, and then chapter 2 we're now in, which is called the human communion. This is starting off in paragraph 1877. So the vocation of humanity is to show forth the image of God and to be transformed into the image of the Father's only Son. This vocation takes a personal form, since each of us is called to enter into the divine beatitude. It also concerns the human community as a whole. I know we're moving into the person and society, the communal character of the human vocation. So this is paragraph 1878. All men are called to the same end, God himself. There is a certain resemblance between the union of the divine persons and the fraternity that men are to establish among themselves in truth and love. Love of neighbor is inseparable from love for God. The human person needs to live in society. Society is not for him an extraneous addition, but a requirement of his nature. Through the exchange with others, mutual service, and dialogue with his brethren, man develops his potential. Uh, and he thus responds to his vocation. A society is a group of persons bound together organically by a principle of unity that goes beyond each one of them. As an assembly that is at once visible and spiritual, a society endures through time. It gathers up the past and prepares for the future. By means of society, each man is established as an heir and receives certain talents that enrich his identity and whose fruits he must develop. He rightly owes loyalty to the communities of which he is part and respect to those in authority who have charge of the common good. Each community is defined by its purpose and consequently obeys specific rules, but the human person is and ought to be the principle, the subject, and the end of all social institutions. Certain societies, such as the family and the state, correspond more directly to the nature of man. They are necessary to him. To promote the participation of the greatest number in the life of a society, the creation of voluntary associations and institutions must be encouraged on both national and international levels, which relate to economic and social goals, to cultural and recreational activities, to sport, to various professions, and to political affairs. This, quote, socialization also expresses the natural tendency for human beings to associate with one another for the sake of attaining objectives that exceed individual capacities. It develops the qualities of the person, especially the sense of initiative and responsibility, and helps guarantee his rights. Socialization also presents dangers. Excessive intervention by the state can threaten personal freedom and initiative. Well, isn't that timely to read that? The teaching of the church has elaborated the principle of subsidiarity, according to which a community of a higher order should not interfere in the internal life of a community of a lower order, depriving the latter of its functions, but rather should support it in case of need and help to coordinate its activities with the activities of the rest of society, always with a view to the common good. God has not willed to reserve to himself all exercise of power. He entrusts to every creature the functions it is capable of performing according to the capacities of its own nature. This mode of governance ought to be followed in social life. The way God acts in governing the world, which bears witness to such great regard for human freedom, should inspire the wisdom of those who govern human communities. They should behave as ministers of divine providence. Um, this also opposes all forms of collectivism. It sets limits for state intervention. It aims at harmonizing the relationships between individuals and societies. It tends towards the establishment of true international order. So, briefly, every once in a while, you'll probably hear somebody claim that Jesus was a socialist. Not so. Or they'll say, the early Christians were socialist or communist. Not so. They didn't have to sell or give away all of their goods for the church, same as members of a communist society have to give away their rights and their private ownership to the state. If any of the early apostles did that, or early disciples did that, and you'll read about this in, I can't remember where in Acts, but if you look in Acts, you'll read the people got together at the beginning, sold their stuff for the betterment of the community, etc. They chose to do that. They weren't forced into it. So don't be misled by thinking that that any part of the Christian faith is socialist or promotes any type of principles that are socialist or communist. In fact, the Catholic Church has spoken against socialism, collectivism, such as we read here, but in greater detail. There have been great writings from popes and religious leaders on the evils of socialism. And I mean, we even see the apparition of our Blessed Mother at Fatima, warning us against the evils of Russia, which would be communism as it was understood at the time. So no, communism, bad. Excessive state intervention into the personal freedoms of the members of the society. Very, very bad. Okay, let's move on, shall we? So we're going to finish up. We're in the section 2, conversion and society. These are paragraphs 1886 to 1889. So society is essential to the fulfillment of the human vocation. To attain this aim, respect must be accorded to the just hierarchy of values, which subordinates physical and instinctual dimensions to interior and spiritual ones. I'm going to read something from Pope John the 23rd. Sorry, I had to count my Roman numerals there for a second. Okay, so human society must primarily be considered something pertaining to the spiritual. Through it, in the bright light of truth, men should share their knowledge, be able to exercise their rights and fulfill their obligations, be inspired to seek spiritual values, mutually derive genuine pleasure from the beautiful, of whatever order it be, always be readily disposed to pass on to others the best of their own cultural heritage, and eagerly strive to make their own the spiritual achievements of others. These benefits not only influence, but at the same time give aim and scope to all that has bearing on cultural expressions, economic and social institutions, political movements and forms, laws, and all other structures by which society is outwardly established and constantly developed. The inversion of means and ends, which results in giving the value of ultimate end to what is only a means for attaining it, or in viewing persons as mere means to that end, engenders unjust structures, which make Christian conduct in keeping with the commandments of the divine lawgiver difficult and almost impossible. It is necessary then to appeal to the spiritual and moral capacities of the human person and to the permanent need for his inner conversion, so as to obtain social changes that will really serve him. The acknowledged priority of the conversion of heart in no way eliminates, but on the contrary imposes the obligation of bringing the appropriate remedies to institutions and living conditions when they are an inducement to sin, so that they conform to the norms of justice and advance the good rather than hinder it. And finally, in paragraph 1889, without the help of grace, men would not know how to discern the often narrow path between the cowardice which gives into evil and the violence which under the illusion of fighting evil only makes it worse. This is the path of charity, that is, of the love of God and of neighbor. Charity is the greatest social commandment. It respects others and their rights. It requires the practice of justice, and it alone makes us capable of it. Charity inspires a life of self-giving. Whoever seeks to gain his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will preserve it. I think these are very important paragraphs to read in our current time, with mandates and law, or the proposal of laws or changes to our communities, which feel like they are hindering the rights of the individual person, and using people as means to an end, which Catholics are always against. Humans, each person, no matter who they are or what they can do, have, or what they can't do, have dignity, the utmost dignity, based on the life given to them by our Creator. So just something to remember as we go about fighting or not fighting, right? There is cowardice in not doing anything, and there is sin in fighting something to the point of violence when it is not needed, as we read in that last couple paragraph or two. All right, everyone, let's see where we're going next. I'm reading off my phone tonight. Oh, let's see. Okay. So actually, if you aren't familiar with this, hold on, I got to take a sip of something. If you aren't familiar with the Catholic Catechism, at the end of every section, they do an in brief, which summarizes very briefly, as the subtitle suggests, but very briefly, we'll summarize what we just read. And also, sometimes it gives more information or different quotes that are useful to read. I usually skip over those because we did read it in depth just, a few moments ago. But if you really want just like to get in and tackle some of these sections a little bit faster on your own, you could always just go to that in brief. We're going to talk about participation in social life, starting off with authority and the common good next time, which will be very interesting in light of our current times, which are not unique. Everything old is new again. So don't despair, please. There have been times in our world history that things have been even more dire than they seem to be now. But hey, Lord Jesus, come again anytime. All right, so please subscribe if you don't want to miss these videos. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, but also subscribe to the podcast, because that's where the bulk of my the longer interviews are posted. But if you're just listening, come on over to YouTube. There are exclusive videos there. I'm going to be doing a Hearth and Homeschool series covering all sorts of home and homeschool stuff, as the name implies. So I'd love to see you there as well. All right, everyone, until next time.